Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today for Wednesday, April 30th. It's Alissa Coram here, and what a comeback for the month of April. A topsy-turvy month full of lots of twists and headlines, and we're in the thick of earnings season. And joining me to break down all the action, not only in today's session, but a look at how the month unfolded, is my colleague David Saito Chung. Dave, great to have you join me on Stock Market Today. Let's give the audience a quick little rundown of what we're going to be covering in today's show.
Absolutely. Glad to help finish out a crazy month. And we are going to highlight a big earnings mover, Oddity Tech, ODD. We're also going to look at another big earnings mover in the biotech area, and that is GeneDx, WGS, and then round out the discussion on stocks with a trio of what I like to call new era transfer plays. So that would include Uber, Dash, and Google.
So we've got a 3-for-1
Three
special
for one.
in
Exactly.
today's lineup. I love it, Dave. Okay, well, we'll get to those stocks, but first, let's analyze the action for the major indexes. An interesting day and an interesting month. So on the day, the Nasdaq Composite closing down less than 0.1%, so battling back after a solidly lower open in reaction to quarterly GDP data. And let's also take a look at the S&P 500 gaining on the day. Look at this reversal here, Dave. The S&P up almost 0.2% on the day. Meanwhile, the Dow was up almost 0.4%. Small caps did lag today with the Russell down about 0.6% or so, headed into the final stretch of the day, but coming off of its lows as well. And I think we also, we need to talk about where we're at in this current market. But just for some context here, Dave, a look
Mhm.
at the monthly chart for the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 here. It's been dramatic, I think is a great word to describe it.
Yeah, you're not exaggerating at all, and actually wanted to spend a little more time on the monthlies than the dailies. And just like you nailed it. Look at on our market search charts, we show where the indexes close or the stocks close, not where they open, because we feel like how we finish on a day to day and week to week and month to month basis is important. And so the fact that in this month, in less than 2 weeks, we had a follow through day, and we were up from that level, and we also have a nice gain that could have been a disastrous April in Nasdaq. If you look at the NYSE composite, I think it was just down a little bit. Look how it finished very close to the monthly high. Same with the S&P 500. I do want to point out that the Dow Jones Utility Average, that's 0 DJU for those who use our charts on investors.com and market search, that was up. And that was up the strongest, even up more than the NASDAQ, which kind of goes to show that there's still a little defensive feelings among investors.
Mhm.
Nonetheless, we do like to see markets bounce off their lows, especially when we've got that confirmation signal.
Absolutely. Great color there, Dave. Let's zoom in on the daily chart here. So we now have quite a win streak for the S&P. And what was key, I think, about today was that support at the 21-day line. That's something that IBD senior market strategist Mike Webster has been very focused on, has studied a lot in market history. So the fact that as of now, we're holding that level, even though we're coming up to a declining 50-day that's looming quite large here. The support today has got to be encouraging for the bulls.
I agree. The fact that we finished the month closer to the 50-day than the 21-day. We know that a lot of people like to focus on that so-called death cross of the 50-day crossing the 200-day 2 weeks ago. But that's kind of old news, according,
Yeah.
based on our IBD style of analysis of day-to-day action. We went to 0 to 20% exposure for active stock investors way back in the middle to late March, right? And that was
Mhm.
even before the 50-day even approached that 200 days. So right now, what we do see is, uh, you know, a, a, mixed picture. So generally, if a real bottom is in play, we're going to see these indexes stride across their 50 and 200-day lines, and over time we're going to see those 50, 200-day lines start to rise again. We aren't there yet.
Yeah. So the outlook has improved, but there are still hurdles ahead. Looking at the weekly chart, the S&P as of now is above the 10-week line. And so it's Wednesday and we've got key earnings reports tonight, tomorrow night from some of the biggest names in the market. So we'll have to see how that impacts the index action into Friday. But for now,
Hmm.
the S&P is above the 10-week line, and taking a look at the Nasdaq, looks like that's also above the 10-week line. Hasn't quite gotten above the 50-day just yet, but a very encouraging close off lows here for the tech heavy index as well.
Exactly. And, I think a lot of people who don't use charts the way we do at IBD might think, well, I'm just going to sit out this correction until I see, for instance, the Nasdaq or the NYSE indexes pop positive for the year. We're still down pretty sharply for the year after two wonderful bull market years in 2023, 2024. But what I think was really more important is to really listen to what leading stocks are doing, and we're going to talk about a few, as well as just how the market is acting after a follow through day. And so far, Ali, it's been perfect action, in my humble opinion. We haven't had a distribution day since that April 2022 day 9 follow through on the S&P
Mhm.
500. The Nasdaq also followed through. And normally, if a fledgling rally is, you know, fails, we're usually going to see some bad reversals to the downside and heavy distribution, significant declines in heavier volume. We haven't done that.
Right.
We've seen heavy volume sell-offs in individual stocks, but not on the broad market basis. And I just like to point out too that what's interesting is today, we had pretty much a mixed bag, with the small caps down.
Yeah.
That's probably why the breadth was negative today.
Mm.
Early data shows that losers beat winners 4-3 on the NYSE, and close to 3-2 on a Nasdaq. But that doesn't mean you can't look for some great stocks that could uh, lead us out of this bear market.
Absolutely. Well said. We will take it. Okay, let's get your quick thoughts on what we're seeing in treasuries here, Dave. That was also something that was pretty wild about the
Hmm.
month of April, but it feels like the bond market has calmed down quite a bit.
100%. I like that choice of words, especially when you look at this chart. Divide that number by 10. You've got the 10-year Treasury bond yield, a very good benchmark for mortgage rates, for the cost of making stock buybacks and borrowing money for capital investments and whatnot. You can see that we're well off that year-to-date high of 4.8%. We're also well off the multi-year peak of 5%. When we if the market gets afraid of the U.S. economy or uh, the general finances of the country, the so-called bond vigilantes could spur another retreat out of U.S. Treasuries, which are considered a safe haven. That could really cost the stock market, the economy, consumers, if we were to see interest rates head toward that 5%. We aren't seeing that yet.
Yeah.
And I just like the fact that this weekly chart is very important. You see that volatility since uh, Jerome Powell and company raised interest rates heavily in 2022. The overall volatility of the bond market is less, and that's
Mhm.
good for stocks.
Yeah. Okay, we'll keep an eye on that. We also quickly want to touch on Bitcoin and gold before we move on. Here's a look at IBIT. Full disclosure, I do own a position here, down about 1.3% on the day. But for the month, it's been a great month for Bitcoin. This ETF up 14.3% as we're starting to see more of a risk on mentality, especially in recent weeks after a lot of volatility, the fear gauge spiking, and a lot of wild action that really kicked off the month of April. It now seems like, at least in the short term, turning a little bit of a page. investors are getting perhaps a little bit more comfortable with the tariff uncertainty and maybe pricing that in a little bit more. But who knows? The next headline could, you know, make us uncomfortable once more. We'll have to see. But if you're just focusing on price action and some of these other indicators that we're looking at, it does seem like, again, as of now, we're turning a bit of a corner, Dave.
Yeah, I 110% agree with it, with what you said. And let's note for our great audience the bullish action we just saw in IBIT there, and you see it's an outside month where the high and the low of April exceeded the high and the low of March, and it was to the upside. That
Mhm.
kind of signifies buyers held the upper hand, demand was there, and it's also coinciding with the ongoing strength in gold. If you
Yeah,
could take a look at
absolutely.
GLD, this is like the
Look
fifth
at that.
straight, yeah, the fourth straight up month. And look at those 2 months where it cooled off. That was just like a resting period. It was
Yeah,
like,
what cool off. No.
well, yeah, it was like gold went on a,
Yeah,
went on a 10K
cat
run,
nap.
went into the sauna for just a couple months, and then started taking off again, right?
Yeah,
Very athletic move by gold, which is obviously still working as an inflation hedge and
right.
just a safe haven asset. The big question going forward, Ali, is whether Bitcoin is going to continue to fulfill its role as another bucket, another asset class for financial assets. And it seems like, based on that nice uptrend we're seeing in Bitcoin, the future looks pretty bright.
Yeah, we shall see. Okay, now let's move on and check in on some notable stocks from today's session. It wasn't all sunshine out there today. A poor reaction, to say the least, here, Dave, from Gene DX, ticker WGS, down 43% on the day. Very disappointing.
Oh, I agree. It's likely the biggest one-day drop for the stock, a new stock, a promising stock, given that they are fusing AI with genetic uh, research and discovery. And you can see by the sales that the sales growth is there. The earnings are starting to come in. The issue was the fact that after a big move, as you can see, you can't even see the whole move, right? Unless you go to best fit. There you go. You had a hundredfold move. I mean, this is unbelievable. That kind of hundred bagger kind of move just doesn't happen that quickly for 99.9% of stocks. So if we go back to the daily chart, what I find interesting is that the stock had been moving nicely ahead of earnings, and then wham, it just shows how difficult it is to trade around earnings. And luckily, what I saw on the IBD Live Q&A, where during our show that you and I co-host, as well as Ed Carson, there were people who did use options to hedge their long positions in the
Mm,
stock, and that certainly must have helped a lot, because uh, there's no way, given that the gap down came just above $80 a share. There's no way you can cut your loss at 7%, which is IBD's golden
yeah.
rule. So, yeah, I think it just goes to show that since regulation, fair disclosure, one really has to approach individual stocks, and particularly these high flying biotechs, with extra caution.
Couldn't agree more, Dave. Next on our list, let's check out an earnings winner from today, and that is Oddity Tech in the cosmetic space, also trying to inject AI into what they are doing.
Yeah.
A nice breakout here, up 30% on the day. Massive volume behind the move. It looks like a character change to me underway potentially here for this stock, which is now in new all-time high territory, crossing its previous highs from its IPO debut in summer of 23.
What a great stock to examine today. You totally nailed it on the analysis. It goes to show that earnings cuts both ways, right? It can cut the way of WGS, but it can also cut in the way of oddity. And we know that that's a long consolidation that wouldn't fit any of the models that we see in How to Make Money in Stocks. The first chapter of the fourth edition, where there are 100 model stocks to view their chart action. But the numbers came in super strong. I just want to highlight that the 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 company raised its fiscal year forecast. The gross margins for this Israeli-based cosmetics company, 74.9%, 110 basis points up. They have a lot of cash in the bank, 87 million in free cash flow. Companies accelerating international expansion. Companies also expanding its Oddity Labs molecule discovery platform. A lot of interesting new stuff going on at this company, and they've clearly established themselves as a new leader in a very important industry that maybe straddles both the defensive aspects of the economy,
Right.
right, as well as the growth aspects of the economy. So it's kind of an interesting thing, given that we had a great move by Elf. Elf is not a leader anymore. Many decades ago, we had a great leader in Estee Lauder. EL,
Mhm.
not a leader anymore. Have they passed the torch over to Oddity?
Mhm.
I think it's very important to keep watching this.
Yeah.
And my final
Ulta,
comment.
another
Hmm?
one that previously
And
had.
ultimately, exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. Not
Mhm.
down and out yet. Look at that incredible move. This is probably a stock that had a hundred bagger as well. And then I would say for those who are wondering, well, let's say, Allie and Dave, I didn't have time to look at my computer until 30 minutes into the open. Like, how can I get into this stock?
Right.
Well, one thing is to maybe watch and see if a new base forms, whether it
Mhm.
tests the 21-day exponential moving average, which is way below 45 or somewhere around there. So it's going to be a while before that can happen. But I think
Mhm.
this is a good moment to mention that if you go to that 5 or 15-minute chart, we do have an alternate buy point, and we would in a market search chart use those first two 5-minute bars, not the first one, but the first two, right? And once it cleared the high of that first two 5-minute bars, that would be a genuine alternate buy point, but only if these criteria are met. Good market, good company with really good fundamentals, uh, and in a good group. Those are very important. You can't just do it with any stock. It has to be a special stock. And so this breakaway gap, kind of scary to buy, but and obviously we can see in hindsight it worked. 20% gain from that ultimate buy point.
Right.
But this is something that can be used as a precedent for
Mhm.
for future big winners.
Well said. And you also mentioned we can keep our eye out for an alternate entry. Sometimes when you get these explosive moves on earnings, you will see, from the leaders, tight action and an alternative entry that presents itself. So we'll keep an eye out for that. Let's now take a look at your trio of new era transport stocks briefly here, Dave.
Yeah, let's do it briefly because I know everyone's got a lot of stuff to do, and I've got to get back to the leaderboard and other things too. But I just want to mention all three at the same time because I think the charts look very interesting to me. You see Uber is in a consolidation, but near the high of that base. Nice uptrend. A lot of interesting things going on with them, and they've successfully created a new revenue streams, not just simply taking
Mhm.
people back and forth, but the Uber Eats is doing well. Let's now go over and 90 relative strength. I like that. And then let's go to Dash, the stock that you and I like to talk about. I don't have shares in Dash right now, but I've invested in this one in the past, and I'm looking forward to another excellent potential breakout. No guarantee that the basis form that means that a breakout is going to happen, but this is setting up in a beautiful double bottom. You could probably even establish a tiny position now because it crossed a trend line. And
Mhm.
as we know, Dash has become profitable, huge ecosystem, great service in good times and bad times of the economy. And therefore, these two are my favorites within the new transport age. And then let's go to Google though. Let's don't count out the 800-pound gorilla of web search, who's finally looking like they might create some substantial revenue through their Waymo taxi, right? And who knows, will Waymo start also, or some other iteration start doing the kind of stuff that Uber and Dash do in terms of delivery of product, not just people? Uh, I think it's interesting that when you look at this chart, Ali, uh, on the negative side, the relative strength rating is horrible. However, I would assume that if the stock continues to build that right side of the base and you see more gains on a weekly basis in higher volume and declines, thin, narrow declines in lower volume, that would suggest that perhaps the tide has turned from excess supply of stock to growing demand.
All right, we'll be watching those stocks. Because it is a big earnings week, I do want to wrap up with a little look at some of the big reports out after the bell. Meta shares up 7% here, Dave. It looks like it beat on profit and revenue. So we like to see that, even though this, like Google, has been beaten down along with Microsoft. It's been underperforming as well, but the initial reaction here is positive as well for Microsoft. The stock up 6% after the bell. And we do know that after hours action doesn't necessarily always translate to the following day, but hey, these are
Yeah.
two big megas out there. So seeing positive reactions, even if you're not trading these stocks, seems like it would be good for the overall market. So we like to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting too, right at 418, that is still below the 200-day on Microsoft. So it'll be interesting whether in time can it recover, reclaim that 200-day moving average and get the moving averages going in the right direction. Uh, the growth in Microsoft has shall we say moderated, but still very steady. That weekly chart on market search shows a exceptional earnings stability factor. The lower, the better. And I plan to write about this company once again for the wide audience. Is Microsoft a buy now? Is it a hold? Is it a sell? I'll be addressing those issues.
Mm.
And you can see that six earnings stability factor is looking good. Signs of a bottoming out there. Let's keep watching that one. And then if we go to Meta, Meta has been a better performer, but so no wonder it's corrected a lot more. Look at that. Look at that 25.9% off the high, Ali. What this means is don't try to jump the gun too early here. Let the base continue working, and let's see if maybe a genuine trend line buy point emerges. Let it retake that 40-week and hold. Be patient on this one.
Agree. Two more quick ones to see if the results are out and the reaction here. Robinhood not seeing a whole lot of movement in the stock just yet. Shares down a little over 1% at the moment. So this is another one that we're going to be watching tomorrow, as well as Sprouts Farmers Market. It looks like this stock down a little over 5%. Had been forming the right side of a base, heading into the
Mhm.
report, but we did point out on IBD Live this morning the bad reaction it had last quarter to earnings. That was definitely a pretty big blemish on the chart here. But again, we'll have to see how it's treated tomorrow. We know Spotify that had an initially poor reaction, but it was able to recover off lows that day. And then today had a really nice day of outperformance. So you just never know with earnings season, Dave.
That's so true. Just one comment I would like to add about SFM Sprouts is that you see how it was rising ahead of the earnings, kind of a very classic Wall Street buy the rumor, sell the news. That exactly happened in the prior report. Keep in mind that the stock had already had a big run ahead of
Yeah.
these last two earnings reports, so that creates the extra risk of buying kind of late in the game. Not to say that Sprouts Farmers can't double here or make another move. The company is doing great. I always hear nothing but positive news from people who shop there. Nonetheless, the chart tells you that it probably needs a little more time to really set up a beautiful new breakout.
All right. Well, fantastic thoughts today, Dave. We really appreciate you joining us.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you so much, and let's root for a good May.
Yes, I'm with you. All right. Well, thanks again, Dave. And thanks everyone for tuning in. That is it from us for today, but we will be back with more tomorrow morning on IBD Live starting 10 minutes before the opening bell. Investors.com/IBD Live for all the details. We'll see you then. And then we'll also see you right back here tomorrow after the close. I do want to mention one more thing. Today is Wednesday, so it's our weekly podcast starting at 5 p.m. Eastern, live with host Justin Nielsen. He's going to be speaking with Andrew Channon about stocks like Rocket Lab and ASTS Space Mobile. AST Space Mobile, ticker there is ASTS. So, fascinating discussion on innovations in space. So, check that out live on our YouTube channel. And then we'll see you back here tomorrow, everyone. Thanks for watching.